All right, welcome back. I am the Kodiak, and today I'm here to talk about Devaughn Vele. And I'm pretty convinced that the Broncos dang near cloned him almost in the fact that he is our new Tim Patrick. But before we get into it, leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're not already. Thank you for 100 subscribers. Thank you very much for 100 subscribers. This is only the beginning. Let's dive right into it. So here's what I'm going to be talking about, comparing Tim Patrick to Devaughn Vele and the fact that we now have a new Tim Patrick. So I'm going to be talking about their profiles because very, very, very similar dudes when they were coming out of Utah. And I'm going to give you a refresher on what kind of player was Tim Patrick because it's a guy we haven't seen on the field or we haven't seen play football for us in 3 years. And I'm going to give you a deep dive into Devaughn Vele, his college football career, and his prospect profile in general, what Devaughn Vele has meant to Sean Payton and Bo Nix, and what he means to this team this year and going forward as well. So yeah, here we go. So here are some similarities between Tim Patrick and Devaughn Vele. So both guys are 6'4", 200 plus from San Diego. Now Tim Patrick is technically listed on the Lions website as 6'5", and I believe 212. But either way, he measured in half the combine as 6'4", and I believe 1/8 of an inch. So yeah, not really any higher than almost 6'4" flat. But either way, they're both from San Diego, which I thought was really interesting. What would have made this really scary is if they went to the same high school in San Diego, but they didn't. They went to different high schools, but either way. So both of them walked on at Utah and were fringe day 3/UDFA prospects. Now, how they got there was very, very different because Tim Patrick, he had a really rocky JUCO journey. He was actually, I think, on track to be cut from a few teams, and Georgia yanked his scholarship offer because his grades were so bad at his JUCO, and his father spent 15 years in prison. So he had a really, really, really rocky upbringing, and it's great to see that he finally was able to, get out of that, and he was able to make his stamp on the NFL and make his mark in Broncos country in general. But on the complete opposite side of the coin, like it literally can't be more different. Devaughn Vele, he spent 4 years out of high school on a mission trip. So he started playing football at the age of 23. And when both guys got into the NFL, they were both really old rookie wide receivers, which when you're basically 23, 24 as a rookie, you're considered geriatric because a lot of the, analytic production thresholds for wide receivers do not favor old guys. Like if you are a 24, 23-year-old wide receiver coming out, the premise when it comes to like analytic-based scouting is that good players declare early and as soon as possible. And with all these, COVID guys that have had like 5-6 years of eligibility, that kind of has thrown a wrench into that idea. But either way, Vele being a 26-year-old rookie, that is, if 24 is considered geriatric, 26 is considered prehistoric. Except I do think his age helps him quite a bit, and he's playing the game like he's a veteran. But look at the athletic profile. It is insanely similar. They are both 6'4". So as you can see, Tim Patrick does have almost a full point higher. But even then, there's not that many disparities. I guess if you're going to look at one, it's that Tim Patrick just has more natural strength than Devaughn Vele. He literally benched twice as many reps, which, Tim Patrick has incredible athleticism for an NFL wide receiver. He tested very well at the combine, and Vele tested kind of how I'd expect a 26-year-old rookie who never really had great production in college to test. Now, what I will say, 40-yard dash, identical, 4.47, and the 20-yard split, almost identical as well, just due to the fact that Vele ran at 2.6 and Tim Patrick at 2.56. So Tim Patrick ran 0.04 faster than Vele when it came to the 20-yard split. And also when it came to the 10-yard split, Tim Patrick was 0.02 faster than Devaughn Vele, because you can see here 1.56 and Devaughn Vele 1.58. Now, what I don't really... This is kind of surprising to me that there's such a disparity in like the relative athletic score method and calculation, even with this slim of differences in their speed. But I guess NFL guys are all kind of hovering around this level, so that makes a lot of sense to me. But either way, vertical very similar there. Tim Patrick has almost 1.5 inches on him. Broad jump also very, very similar. Shuttle, very similar as well. 3-cone, like all this stuff is very identical. And this is, it's almost like Vele is a Tim Patrick clone. Like, that's why, that's what I got the title of this video from. Now, disclaimer, before I go any further, I just want to say that this title is kind of clickbait because these guys do not play the same role on offense. Tim Patrick was an X receiver, and Devaughn Vele has lined up mainly as a slot, but we'll get to that. So Tim Patrick's role, he's an incredible story, as I alluded to in my last slide. He had a bad family life. His father spent 15 years in prison. He grew up in a single-family household with only his mother, and I think he had an older brother and a younger sister. And he had a very, very rocky college football experience. He went to a JUCO in California. Not exactly sure what JUCO it was, but he got offered a scholarship from several teams, but they ended up yanking it because his grades were so bad. And he was cut 3 times in the NFL. But before that, I think, when he was at Georgia, he was supposed to go there, he was supposed to go to Georgia, but then they yanked his scholarship because his grades weren't good enough. And there was another school in the mix that he was supposed to go to that, his grades also weren't good enough for. And then Utah tells him, hey, if you pass all your classes, we will have a spot for you. Not a scholarship, but a spot for you. So Tim Patrick, he passes all his classes, and then what does he do? He ends up going to Utah, and after day 1 of spring practice, can't remember the exact year, he ends up getting a scholarship offer. So when he came to the NFL, he was cut 3 times. He was cut by Baltimore. He originally signed with Baltimore in 2017 when he came out, and he was undrafted. And then he went to San Francisco, and John Lynch tells him, hey, man, don't give up. I can tell you can play in the league, and, I don't tell that to anyone. And then 2017 was kind of a transition period for the Broncos skill position weapons, and they ended up picking him up as a UDFA, and what a gem they got. So the yards per game in 2020 and 2021 was very similar between Tim Patrick, Judy, and Courtland Sutton because they all averaged around 45 receiving yards per game. Now, in 2018 and 2019, Tim Patrick was hurt for pretty much half the year, I think. But in 2018, that's when Tim Patrick really started to, get some run as a wide receiver because I remember his first touchdown. I remember it was Case Keenum to Tim Patrick, I think in the 4th quarter, in Kansas City to cut the deficit to a resounding 30-23. So, but either way, Tim Patrick, he kind of made his role as a Broncos wide receiver by, being that steady, reliable dude. And even though the Broncos spent a 2nd-round pick on Courtland Sutton, who ended up developing into a really nice player, and Jerry Jeudy in 2020, who was a 1st-round pick, he ended up carving out a role next to 2 at least very dependable NFL wide receivers in what was a very, very anemic passing offense in 2020 and 2021 with Pat Shurmur. Oh my goodness, those were some painful years with, Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater both throwing those dudes the ball, and the offense production just wasn't there. Nowhere near what it is today. I look back on those days and I'm just like, wow, we have come so far. But either way, so what was Tim Patrick's role? So as far as the offense, as far as what he did as a receiver, he was a big-bodied receiver who was a deep ball specialist and a primary outside X. Now, not only was he a deep ball specialist, but he was a very, very reliable target. How many times on 3rd and 8 did we see Tim Patrick run a dig 8 yards downfield, perfectly 8 yards downfield, and then he made a really, really tough catch, boxed out the defender to pick up the 1st down. And making those important chain-moving catches, that reminds me a lot of what Vele is doing and what he has done with the Broncos thus far. I remember there have been a couple times where we've been like, all right, Vele, you're going to have to make a dive and catch. Bonix, you're going to have to put this, on the ground. Vele is literally going to have to lay out for it, and he has done that. He has done that, and he has delivered in an enormous way. Now, Tim Patrick had season-ending injuries in July of 2022 and August of 2023, and it cut his time with the Denver Broncos short, and they also kept him on the practice squad, or not on the practice squad, but on the roster this whole offseason. And they ended up cutting him really, really late. I'm pretty sure he was a deadline cut, which it didn't make a lot of sense at the time. But if you look at the play of Vele so far, you can understand that this is why they felt comfortable moving on from Tim Patrick. And I was one of those that didn't agree with that at the time. Ultimately, I think they made the right decision because, honestly, they would just have too many dudes playing the exact same role, especially since they were going to get Josh Reynolds back. And you give Tim Patrick each chance to win a ring with the juggernaut Detroit Lions. So, come playoff time, I know we're all crossing our fingers that the Lions can, get it done this year, provided unless they're going up against the Broncos. But yeah. So let's talk about Vele, the guy this video is actually about. So Vele went into college at 22 years old after a long mission trip after high school. Now, the mission trip actually on his Wikipedia said it was only 2 years long, but he took 4 years. He took a 4-year gap from graduating high school and going into Utah 2015 to 2019. So maybe he took a year off or two. I don't know. But he never really had great college football production in 5 years, and it could have been an offensive coordinator issue because I know that Utah's offensive coordinator, who was the OC when Vele was there in Utah, actually ended up stepping down 2 weeks ago. I can't remember his name, but for those of you who follow the Big 12 and follow college football more than I do, you can probably speak to that. Maybe it was a quarterback issue because I remember there was that quarterback not Rising. One of the things that people said about Cam Rising was that he preferred to throw to the tight ends and the running backs. And, granted, Utah had a good enough offensive ecosystem while Vele was there to at least get Dalton Kincaid drafted in the first round. But regardless, when you have a guy like Barnes, I think, Barnes was the quarterback last year who everyone absolutely hated. That's when the production for Vele really, really took off. He played really, really well in the last handful of games in 2023. And the reason this is because he got moved to the slot by Utah, which skyrocketed his production at the end. He started lining up in the slot on like 55 to 60% of his offensive snaps, and that's what really, really started to get his production going. Now, he performed really well versus some good teams. Granted, Arizona is not that good this year, but he performed very well against them last year when they were pretty good. And also ASU was really good last year. Same with Oregon, same with Washington. And Vele was really, really good in those games. He made his mark. And I wouldn't be surprised if, one of those 4 games was what really caught the attention of the Broncos scouting department and, draft team or whatever. Now, let's talk about Devaughn Vele in Denver so far. He was drafted in the 7th round, pick 235, I believe. Our second to last pick, can't remember who our last pick was. I think it was Nick Gargiulo. So, yeah, but he made a couple of plays during camp that had Broncos country on notice. I remember he made that play where he either jumped over a defender or made like a leaping one-handed catch, and it had Broncos country talking for a couple days. And that's when everybody was like, all right, this guy's making the team. Like, there is no question about it. And that's exactly what you want from a guy who, honestly, you just took a flyer on. You just took a flyer on, and his emergence in camp made the team fine with moving on from Tim Patrick. Now, what has made him so reliable and why I think he's our new Tim Patrick is because he has converted on 8 of his 9 third down targets this year. He's done a great job making the tough catches, and he has taken 66% of his snaps from the slot this year. But the past 2 games, it's been 50-50 from the slot versus outside. So maybe he has some versatility there. Maybe he has some versatility there because I know he did both in college, but he was more productive as a slot. So ideally, that's where they would keep him. Ideally, they would just bring in another X receiver in the offseason to complement Courtland Sutton and Vele. And then you have Franklin as that, flanker. And you also have Mims as, that joker that Sean Payton covets so highly. Maybe you bring in a Tyler Warren. I don't know. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself as far as what our offseason plan was, but he's averaging 4 catches per game for 40 yards, and he has 112 pass rating when targeted. So it is clear that even though Bo Nix does not have the best weapons, even though he doesn't have a lot of chemistry with some of these dudes, even though like his preferred college target in Troy Franklin, it looks like all their chemistry has just gone completely out the window, and all of it has just been channeled into Devaughn Vele. So that's a little unique there. That's a little interesting. But yeah, so here's what I think about Devaughn Vele going forward. He has been an absolute revelation for a team starving for not only skill position talent, but wide receiver talent in particular. And I know that these guys have been playing a lot better in the past month or so. It wasn't nearly as bad at the beginning of the season when everything just looked all sorts of out of sync. But next year, he is a locked and loaded starting wide receiver because we've seen enough from him. We've seen enough from him to realize that, he is what we really, really want going forward in our offense. He complements this team so well. He complements our identity and our direction so well, especially having Bo Nix and having a preferred target in Devaughn Vele be here next year is just going to be absolutely great. And it doesn't matter what happens at the other wide receiver positions. The slot job is his job to lose. Maybe you bring in T. Higgins. I know that everybody's been talking about that. Everybody's always, marked the Broncos as a team for a guy like T. Higgins. We're probably going to be out of striking range for a guy like Luther Burden or Ted McMillain. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe you get Emeka Egbuka, but either way, the slot job in 2025, it's his to lose because he's just played too well that, the coaching staff in no good faith for a team that has had almost no good wide receiver play this year. It just makes it so hard to move off him and give somebody else a chance because you are going to command your way onto the field. And that's exactly what Vele did yesterday. I mean, 6 for 80 was his final stat line against the Raiders. And he's been huge. He's been huge for Bo Nix, and the age does not concern me. His body has taken 4 years off from football, so his actual football age is closer to like 23, 24. Don't know if his, athleticism is going to be able to keep up with the fact that he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear, but either way, it's just something to think about when we're discussing longevity. Now, Rod Smith also had 22 catches before he turned 27. Then he put up Hall of Fame career numbers. So we've gotten a front row seat in Broncos country as to what a guy who is older coming out can do for a team and for your offense, especially when he's playing as well as Vele is doing. Obviously, Rod Smith, that's a lofty, comparison. That's a lofty comparison and lofty bar for any wide receiver to hit. But it's not impossible. It's not impossible to think that he could be a very, very reliable player for multiple years. Like maybe I'm talking 6, 7 years. I'd be absolutely ecstatic if we were going to get this level of slot play for that long. But yeah, either way, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Either way, I'll see you guys next time. And yeah, peace out.